Then what did you do after you said in like the early 90s you were helping out with like troops coming home and you would like help the families and things like that.
Yeah, I
So
worked with family support when my unit was deployed to when they were deployed to Saudi Arabia and for the Desert Storm. I would help out with family support, doing whatever is necessary through fundraising. I was in the JC's organization. We set a table up in downtown Jackson right on the corner, and I sold these little wooden heart-shaped pins, and it was Operation Homefront, and it was a pin that was shaped like a heart and painted with a flag on it, red, white, and blue, and it had like a yellow ribbon on it. And so we did that to raise money, and then of course when the unit did return, the family support group and I went out along the highways of Jackson County, and we decorated with flags and ribbons and banners and things like that. So
okay, so what did you do after that and when you went back to the army in 2000?
I kind of just did a variety of jobs. I cooked, I was a janitor, I worked in a shop, I drove a truck, I did landscaping. I kind of explored my options of what career path I wanted to go to, and then I ended up, the Army kept bugging me after I was in for the 3 years and gotten out. They kept bugging me every year, and I was like, well, show me some money, give me the money. And finally, in the summer of 2002, they said we can give you a little bit of money to come back in. So I went back in the fall of 2002, and then in the fall of 2003, the order come down for the second wave of troops to be deployed to Iraq for my unit, as a truck driving unit, and so I volunteered to go. And it was kind of hard because I have sons that were then 9 and 3, 9 and 4, something like that, 9 and 5. And so I had to make, there's a lot of decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to take and, not go or go? I even talked with my pastor, and I prayed about it, thought about it, but I thought, because of 9/11 particularly, that's what kind of prompted me. But the other thing that prompted me is that we, as Americans, no matter how bad some of us have it, there's a lot of Iraqis that have it 100 times worse. And so that's the other thing that prompted me to go, because I'm a humanitarian kind of person. I believe that everybody should have a good life. You shouldn't have to fend out of a garbage can for food and live under a cardboard box for shelter and things like that.
So then you said you were medically.
Yep, I was medically discharged. I received a deadly staph infection on Memorial Day of 2004. While in my camp, I woke up that morning, like any normal morning, to go out to my motor pool and prepare my vehicle for the next mission. And I had fallen over when I gotten out of my bunk, and I thought nothing of it, maybe because the bunk is so short and I'm so tall that maybe, the leg lock syndrome kind of thing. But then after I collected myself and took a few more steps, I nearly fell over again. So I thought, okay, there's something wrong. So I had to let my platoon leader know, and he informed me to go let my squad leader know, and the squad leader ended up sending me up to sick call. And a buddy of mine who happened to be wanting to go up there because he had some medical problems that he wanted to get addressed, he helped get me on the bus because I was limping at that time. He helped make sure I got on the bus that transports people up to, because the sick call was clear over on the other side of camp, a few miles away. And so when I got there, they'd taken my temp, and it was 104. Well, when it's 105 degrees in Iraq at 8 o'clock in the morning, you just kind of blend right in with the environment. You have no clue of that you have 104 temp. And so they got me back into the exam room, and the colonel came in, and had me drop my trousers, and he was like, "Whoa, Sergeant." And I was like, "What, sir?" He's like, "Have you looked at your leg lately?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Look down." And so I looked down, and my leg was swelled up like that and as red as my shirt, if not redder, and had heat penetrating 4 to 6 inches above it. And so they determined it was a staph infection, and probably picked up from an abrasion on the end of my toe from my boots is their determination. And they said that if I hadn't come to them when I did, that several results that weren't, none of them good, either I could have had a blood clot, a stroke, a heart attack, died, or they would have had to cut my leg off to save my life. In fact, my lymph nodes were swelled up to the size of my fist. So, yeah, it wasn't a pretty sight. But it took a few weeks. They gave me what they call a doctor's cocktail. It's the 4 strongest antibiotics made in the market. They put it in an IV bag and shake it up, and they administer it to you. Well, it's supposed to knock out the infection like immediately, but because apparently I have this immune deficiency disorder from mom giving me too many antibiotics when I was a kid, it resisted it for more than it was supposed to. In fact, the third night on June 3rd, when I was supposed to be medevaced to Landstuhl, Germany, my blood pressure dropped to around 89/54. They were quite alarmed. The major from the Air Force that was treating me then was concerned that maybe I shouldn't get on that plane. That's 5-hour ride. They do have a medical staff on the plane, but they're not, they don't have an operating room and all that resuscitation equipment and what have you. So, God had it that my blood pressure went up that morning before they transported me. And I got to Germany. I spent a few days in Germany where I couldn't even move. The pain was so excruciating because the blood would rush down into the infection. Well, because the leg was stretched to its maximum point, it didn't allow no more fluid to get down there. And so if I put that pressure with my leg downward, that blood rush down, well, if you can imagine it not having no room to push it, was like, somebody just constantly like that. So then they medevaced me to Maryland Andrews Air Force Base, and then Scott Air Force Base in Illinois for a few days, and then finally in Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I spent 4.5 months in medical hold, and then discharged the first part of November of 2004.
So as a truck driver, what exactly did you transport? Like weapons and men, or just?
We transported mainly cargo, medical supplies, water, Connex boxes of food, whatever the troops in other camps, the military camps that were stationed in Iraq, wherever they were stationed, our company was responsible to make sure those supplies got to them, especially if they were anticipating what they call a zone when they don't want no transportation out on the road because of the threat of ambushes and stuff. They would shut them roads down, and so those camps relied on us getting those supplies to them prior to that anticipated point.
All right. So, are there any people you've stayed in touch with who are still over there or who were over there?
The company that I was with, the 1461st, and I ended up actually getting attached to the 1462nd transportation unit, but we're comprised of multiple units. From time to time, I've went to the armory and run into the first sergeant, who's now a sergeant major, and I did a lot of things. I've made my Operation Sandbox Santa organization that I founded in 2006. I ended up I went out to area high schools and elementary and middle schools and talked with folks like yourself, and I spoke of my experience and collected enough care package items to send 35 boxes over for Christmas 3 years ago. And I just did a fundraiser this past summer. I did my first spaghetti dinner fundraiser, and I'm currently working with another friend of mine who's a singer-songwriter that's raising monies to erect a fallen heroes monument in Jackson to honor one of my friends who I served with, Sergeant Matt Soper, and two other soldiers, and also a soldier from the Lowell community who was the very first soldier to have died in Iraq. So yeah, I'm constantly trying to do whatever it takes. Once a soldier, always a soldier, I believe, and I will do whatever my powers and God allows me to do to make sure that our troops are always taken care of no matter where they're at.
So, did you have any free time really, or was it mostly work all the time? Did you have any recreational activities you did, entertainment?
Most of the time while I was deployed, if I was deployed, like when I was in the Navy, we had Liberty stops, those places that I mentioned prior, Italy and all those places. We'd have swim call. Actually, they would launch a cargo ship net along over the side of the ship, and they would have gunner's mates armed with M16s and stuff man the ship for shark call, and you'd be allowed to go in the water for a little bit and just get wet. Even though it was salt water, still it was kind of cold and a refreshing thing. But while I was in Iraq, there really wasn't a lot of free time. In the evening, once we were done with our mission, I would go up to the PX and do some shopping, or I go to the MWR tent where they provide computers. They have a telephone center. I would do a lot of calling. I probably burn up 3,500 minutes a month talking with friends and family and Christian radio stations back here in Michigan, and the plea for care packages. In fact, that's how I got the idea of the care package thing, is because I made a plea to a Christian radio station in Jackson that a instructor from a chartered academy, a private school in Jackson, had heard, and so about 3 weeks later I received this 70-pound package box that had licorice and writing materials and letters from the kids and things like that, which I took the time to read every letter, and I wrote every student back, and then I not only wrote every student back, but I encouraged my platoon to write a student. So that way there was some correspondence they were hearing. So that's kind of what led me to do the thing. But mainly the computers. They did have a great big screen television, so I got to watch a lot of Red Wing games and Piston games. Actually, during the playoffs, I got to keep in touch with all the Piston playoffs. And they had a pool. There's a building that Saddam Hussein, in the camp that I was at, Saddam Hussein had this building with a real nice pool. Of course, with, you got a lot of soldiers on a camp, and so the water wasn't very cold and refreshing because there's so many bodies in it. It warmed it right up. But still, the point of getting wet at least was refreshing. But yeah, for the most part, there wasn't a lot, but the little things is what kept you sane. The opportunity to get on the internet and chat. They actually had webcams, so if you had friends back home that had a webcam, unfortunately, when power would go out, when the telephone system would go out and the internet connections would go down, then the phones went out, which means you don't get to talk to nobody, or you'd be in the middle of a conversation, all of a sudden you'd be dead, and somebody come in and say, power's out. So that was kind of depressing, but it's still a point that you got a little bit of time to correspond with your friends and family.
Did you have any like weapons training or anything like that?
I went through, while I was in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, for my deployment training, we went through some weapons. We went through rigorous kinds of program. We went through combat medic training to learn how to do IVs and treat massive wounds. I went through how to tear apart what they call a 249 saw. It's a machine gun. It's a great big machine gun that shoots about like 2,000 rounds a minute or something like that. And so I went through learning how to take that apart and put it back together, which is quite tedious. There's a lot of parts in a great big weapon like that. And then we went through, most of ours was just, it was hands-on kind of combat training, a lot of hand-to-hand combat, learning how to put somebody in defensive holds so you could put zip tie cuffs on them if you had to combat a group of angry Iraqis that were doing a protest. But we never came in contact. Being truck drivers, we were constantly, for the most part, other than ambushes and things like that along the roads, we were kind of out in the open. But
Were you ever ambushed?
yeah, a couple of times.
So
Yep.
was that a really terrifying experience?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I had a round missed my head by about 5 foot. It hit the Connex box, and I drew a line. I walked, after we got to our safe zone, I walked that line, and that line was directly right straight across my eyes. So if I would have been doing just a couple of miles an hour slower, or the round would have fired just a little bit faster, I could have been hit. I had a Kevlar on, but I could have been hit maybe someplace in here, or the round may at least went into the vehicle. So yeah, a couple of times. So not like a lot of our troops that have experienced much graver conditions, but I appreciate my life a lot more today than when you get shot at. When you're not used to getting shot at. In fact, that's the hearing loss that I have now is as a result of that ambush, because my gunner, my A driver, had a 249 machine gun, and he returned, and so you got a canister of machine gun shells rattling around inside of a metal cab of a truck. You've got M16 rounds being fired, so you got all that gunfire going on inside this little cab that's about like this. So that's why I have the hearing loss.
So would you recommend this experience to other people, other high school graduates, or anyone?
I would, because the thing that I joined primarily the military for is I was raised by my grandfather, who was very disciplined. In fact, I can remember 6 years old, I stole a candy bar, and he tanned my rear end and made me go back and apologize and pay for it and tan my rear end again. And to this day, 41 years later, I've never taken anything that I don't pay for, and it's good for young people to go into, not more for the sense that you're joining for the college paid education, but if you've come from a dysfunctional family like I did and experienced different challenges of different schools, and I was in like 6 different school districts in my time, and then being raised by nuns in a boys' home for a few years and things like that. All this, kind of, you never had good discipline, and that's really part of, besides wanting to see the world, that's more what I want into it for, because my grandfather raised me so disciplined, and I wasn't getting that from a lot of other places. So, and for the other thing too, it's an honor and it's a privilege to serve your country. A lot of people wonder, well, what happens if I die? But if you go to I'm not sure what Bible verse in the book, but you'll lay down your life for your friends. And that's what I thought about. I've thought about all these years, and that's why I was so kind of upset that the military discharged me, because I didn't want to get back out. And I went back in at 40 years old for a purpose, to stay and so I have two young sons, 13 and 9 now, and even though they're glad that Dad's no longer in the military, they are very proud, and who knows, they may serve someday. I'm not going to put no pressure on them to serve, but so be it if they do. I'll be behind them 100% and do what I can to support them. But yeah, young people, the seniors today need to understand that the military take in our economics, especially right now in our country, money-wise, job-wise. If you don't have a plan to go to college right away, then maybe 3 years or 6 years in the military, get the military benefits of education, a reasonable pay, 3 square meals. Maybe you come from a family that you don't get 3 meals a day. And our society faces so many challenges with a downturn in economics that maybe going in and having the opportunity just to get fed 3 times a day and get free medical and dental and the opportunity to build friendships. In fact, here just 2 years ago, a sailor who I served with on the USS Duert, the ship that I helped commission, he found me. And he still remembers this quirky little thing that I did 20-some years later. And we responded. He's married, living in North Carolina, very successful businessman, got a great family. So that's even more precious, is that the friendships you build. You don't know, it's like here at Eastern Michigan, you don't know the networking you do with people today, the impact that it will make, and who you might meet that will help you out down the road. The power of networking is in itself priceless, because if you give the opportunity, if you're looking for a specific career field or a specific job in that career field, the right networking will possibly land you a job. And you hear it every day, and that's my biggest encouragement to high school kids is, yes, you have to keep your hair cut short, and you have to yes sir, no sir, and do push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that. But you know what? I wouldn't take it back for a second, because the life I live today, the positive attitude that I have, the opportunity to come to Eastern Michigan and serve, in leadership roles here on campus with organizations and things like that, and the opportunity to give back to my community, and I wouldn't give it up for a second, because I've learned something primarily just in the last few months of being here, that it's ironic how, remember 20, 30 minutes ago, I mentioned that I tried to come to Eastern Michigan in 1981. So you look at a 47-year-old guy at 18 years old tried to come to a university that next April he's going to graduate with his BA in marketing from. So you overcome your adversities, and you don't never give up. A lot of kids go through so much peer pressure today that you have to be willing to believe and trust and have faith, and don't give up on those adversities that you think will never allow you to get the successes in life.
Do you ever wish that you could go back into the Army at all?
In a heartbeat. I would, if God could wave a magic wand and cure all of my medical ailments, I wouldn't hesitate for a second not going back in. In fact, I don't have them on today, but I still wear my dog tags, the tags that I was issued when I went to Iraq. Mm-hmm. And because I believe, once a soldier, always a soldier. You take care of your troops. In fact, I had a phone call from a friend, the very same gentleman that made sure that I got to sick call that day in 2004. He called me from Texas today and talked to me for a little bit about some material information that he found out that I may benefit from because I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And so he found some information. So that's, that's what's called taking care of your troops. He's one of my best friends, and he still continues to look out for me, all the way from Texas. So that's the power of friendship and brotherhood and serving each other. Because you don't know. It's like I said about the networking. It may come down to once I graduate, I may not be able to land a field with NASCAR here in Michigan, but maybe he has a connection in Texas that has a connection to NASCAR. And he can be my resume. He can be my letter of recommendation down in Texas. So that's what's so important about keeping the solitude of keeping your friendships and your brotherhood of people, and that's what the military fosters is that brother and sisterhood of developing not just friendships while you're in the military, but lasting friendships for a lifetime.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Pleasure
your
and honor to have the
program.
opportunity.
It's pretty good. Sorry, we have trouble turning it off. Doesn't like me.
Always hit the power button.
All right, well, you're done, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck in your graduation.